Today's notes are titled The Cold War at Home. This is Unit 6, Notes number 4, and this is our last set of notes for this unit. It was a short one. So today we're going to be looking at how the Cold War affects American citizens at home. Fear of communist influence. The Soviet domination of Eastern Europe and the communist takeover of China shocked the American public, fueling a fear that communism would spread around the world. There were about 80,000 Americans who claimed membership in the Communist Party. It was feared that their loyalty was to the Soviet Union first. In March of 1947, President Truman issued an executive order setting up the Federal Loyalty Program, which included a loyalty review board. Its purpose was to investigate government employees and dismiss those who were found to be disloyal to the United States. So in a lot of ways, this is very similar to the Red Scare that we talked about during the 1920s, the Palmer Raids, where we get this, fear, communist paranoia about communism infiltrating our country. Now we're fearful that our workers in the government could be more loyal to the Soviets than to us. From 1947 to 1951, government loyalty boards investigated 3.2 million employees and dismissed 212 as security risks. House Un-American Activities Committee. Other agencies investigated possible communist influence both inside and outside the U.S. government. The most famous was the House Un-American Activities Committee, the HUAC. The HUAC first made headlines in 1947 when it began to investigate communist influence in the movie industry. The committee believed that communists were sneaking propaganda into movies so that directors, writers, producers, they're secretly trying to turn people to support communism by putting in plot lines and themes into these movies. HUAC subpoenaed 43 witnesses from the Hollywood movie industry in September 1947. Many witnesses were considered friendly because they supported these accusations that communists had infiltrated the movie industry. Some actors said that they, turned down scripts because they felt it was too sympathetic to the communist agenda, but not a lot of specific names were given. The Hollywood 10. 10 unfriendly witnesses were called to testify, but refused. These men became known as the Hollywood 10, decided not to cooperate because they believed the hearings to be unconstitutional. And as a result, they were sent to prison. Many other within the movie industry were blacklisted. They were considered to be too sympathetic to the communist cause or having communist party ties. And then because of that, they were fired from their jobs. They were no longer able to work in the profession. People didn't want to be associated with them because of this kind of heightened paranoia. So let's stop and think. Why did the threat of communism cause so much fear in America? So very similar to the Red Scare during the 1920s, people just become fearful because communism is the complete antithesis of democracy and capitalism, or the opposite. And so, especially after World War II, we're seeing communism spread in Eastern Europe. China just became communist. We have the Korean War. So we see communism growing in power, growing in strength. And we do not want to have that come to America and change our way of life. So the threat of communism is much more prevalent than it was during the 1950s. But there really wasn't any evidence of it in terms of plotting an overthrow of the U.S. like these committees kind of took it to. Spy cases stunned the nation. The Soviets were able to explode their own atomic bomb on September 3rd, 1949, years before American experts predicted that it would take them to develop one on their own. It was suspected that communist supporters in the U.S. had leaked secrets of the bomb. So basically, there were spies here, people who were more loyal to the Soviets, that were able to steal the plans of how to make an atomic bomb, gave them to the Soviets, and that was how they were able to make a bomb so much faster. In 1950, a German-born physicist admitted to giving the Soviet Union information. Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, who are pictured there, were implicated in this case. They were minor activists within the American Communist Party, and the evidence against them was very weak. They always declared their innocence, and they were found to be guilty and sentenced to death for their crime. So during this time of heightened paranoia, betraying your country was the ultimate crime. And so this case reminds me of, Sacco and Vanzetti. Were they actually guilty? Did they participate in this? We won't know because the evidence against them was not substantial. McCarthy launches a witch hunt. The most famous anti-communist activist was Senator Joseph McCarthy. Looking for a winning campaign issue in 1952, McCarthy charged that communists were taking over the government, that there were secret communists within the government of America. Taking advantage of people's concerns about communism, McCarthy made one unsupported accusation after another. These attacks on suspected communists became known as McCarthyism. And McCarthyism since then has been kind of synonymous and has been used to refer to unfair tactics of accusing people of disloyalty without providing evidence. So he uses this fear to kind of even go further in just accusing people. And once someone's accused, that's as good as being guilty and having evidence against them. So no one wants to be accused of being a potential communist. So McCarthy's downfall. Finally, in 1954, McCarthy made accusations against the U.S. Army. And so this would become a Senate trial. It would be televised. And within the televised portion of the trial, McCarthy was seen to be bullying the witnesses, making him seem very unsympathetic. And it cost him a lot of public support. The Senate condemned him for improper conduct, and he just lost a lot of support, kind of took all of his accusations just a little bit too far. And in a matter of 3 years, he will pass away. So some causes and effects of McCarthyism. Like, why does this start? It's because we're seeing all of the successful Soviets becoming successful in establishing communist regimes in Eastern Europe. The Korean War ended in a stalemate. Republicans felt that Truman had been too soft on communism. And then as a result of McCarthyism, we see millions of Americans being forced to take loyalty oaths. Activism by labor union goes in decline because that's seen as communist. Many people are afraid to speak out on public issues for fear of what could happen. Will they lose their job? Will they be labeled a communist? And anti-communism continues to drive foreign policy. Other anti-communist measures. Others besides Joseph McCarthy made it their mission to root communism out of American society. By 1953, 39 states had passed laws making it illegal to advocate the violent overthrow of the government, even though such laws violated the constitutional right of free speech. The government investigated union leaders, librarians, newspaper reporters, and scientists. No profession was safe from the hunt for communists. So let's stop and think. How did McCarthyism impact America? So it definitely kind of caused this witch hunt mentality. I know in English, sometimes you guys read the book about the Salem witch trials. I'm drawing a blank about it right now, but it's basically the same idea of kind of just accusing people because you're upset with them, creating a frenzy, and everyone becomes focused on the wrong things. We see this happening in America. People can become overtaken with this hysteria. And it'll last for a while. With McCarthy, lasted from 1952, 53, and 54. And eventually, once people realize that all of these investigations are not coming up with anything, it begins to die down. The Crucible, that was the book I was thinking of. But that's it. We'll talk more about this in class today. Make sure you go back and review your key terms.